give it a minute, but while we're doing that, let me just say good morning, good afternoon to those of you in London. Thank you for joining us today for the unveiling of the British American Business Policy Agenda for 2022-23, which we're going to have a series of discussions about today. Honestly, it would be easier to land a lunar module on Mars, I think, than do a hybrid event like this with speakers from both countries, some in person, some virtual. So bear with us. We are stretching ourselves a little bit, but we've got a good team who are going to handle the technology and make sure that we get through this. And hopefully, it should be an interesting discussion today. I'm going to ask, first of all, our hosts at APCO Worldwide to say a few words. So, Lisi DeCanto, thank you very much for hosting us today, and please.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you all for joining us here today. My name is Lisi DeCanto. I'm the Managing Director of our Washington, D.C. office, which is also our global headquarters. And I'm glad to be joined by my colleague, James Nason, in London, to welcome all of you, both here and there, to our offices. As you said, made it easier to land the lunar module than to bring all of us together. But so many people, both on the council and on our side, work together to make this possible and to be seamless. I merely want to just say thank you to all of you for the conversation that we're going to have, but more importantly, for the relationship that we, APCO Worldwide, as the largest woman-founded independent public affairs firm in the United States and one of the largest around the world, with offices in the UK and around the globe. We're just delighted with the partnership and the collaboration that we have with the council and all of you. We have worked and engaged in so many different opportunities and events like this, and we're looking forward to doing a lot more together. And so I want to thank all of you for the wonderful contributions that we're going to make today and the rich discussion that we have. And we, as a proud member of the council, are excited to be able to welcome all of you, both here and in London, to our home here at APCO Worldwide. James, thank you.
So I think we're going to hear from James a little bit later on in our roundtable discussion. But thank you, Lucy, and thanks again and to your excellent team for hosting us today. So before we hear from our first speakers, just a word about the process that we've been through. So British American Business is fortunate to have a very engaged and active policy steering committee, which reviews and comments on all of the policy work that we do. And over the last year, we've been reviewing the issues that matter to our membership. And we put to our policy steering committee our suggestions of the issues that we would focus on as an organisation for next year. That went through then a review process, as you would expect. And we've now come up with our new policy agenda, which we will send to you. If you haven't already received a draft copy of it, we will send to you the link to that PDF today. The nature of our organisation means that the majority of issues that we're going to focus on are horizontal issues that can affect all businesses that do business in and between the US and the UK. With a couple of exceptions, we have a couple of items which are industry specific. One focused on the financial services sector, which is represents a huge part of our membership. And the other is in the life science space. But all of the other issues that I will talk to you about in a moment are horizontal issues that affect all businesses doing business between the US and the UK. It's also worth saying, obviously, the position that we come at these things from. So we are a pro-trade, pro-business organisation. We are dedicated to finding ways to further liberalize what is already a very, very good trade and investment corridor between the US and the UK. We think it is good, but it can always be better. So that's our focus. And with that, I'm hoping that is David on?
He's on.
So I'm very, very happy to introduce from the US Department of Commerce, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Europe, David DeFalco. So David, are you there? There you are.
Sorry for the issue. I hope everybody can hear me. Good morning and good afternoon, depending where you are. Thank you, Duncan and British American Business, for the introduction, which I may have missed, and the opportunity to participate in today's session. I also want to wish and extend my greeting to Minister Norman and congratulate you, sir, on your new posting as Minister for the Americas. And we do look forward to continuing our close collaboration with your team under your leadership. We've had a very productive relationship, and I'm sure that will continue, especially given the challenges that we're living through right now and the uncertain times that we face. Even as we recover from the COVID pandemic and work to tackle climate change, the reality is that we face rising inflation and energy prices and supply chain pressures. All of this has been exacerbated by Russia's unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine. So no surprise that tackling these issues is a priority for the U.S. administration, including the Commerce Department. As a matter of fact, President Biden recently signed two major pieces of legislation into law, the CHIPS and Science Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. These new laws are going to strengthen and protect our communities and give businesses new incentives to invest and to innovate. I have to say that implementation of the CHIPS Act includes attracting companies that play a role in the manufacture of semiconductors or related materials, including research, and we do see this as an area ripe for US-UK commercial cooperation, and it's certainly an area that we intend to explore. I think it's also worth noting that our supply chains depend on each other. That's something that the pandemic has taught us. And our bilateral trade makes for one of the biggest and most important trading relationships in the world. British and American companies are deeply integrated in each other's economies. I think it's always useful to remind ourselves of how integrated we are, with cumulative foreign direct investment of over $1.5 trillion in 2021. And also a useful reminder that it's responsible, this investment, for millions of jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. Now, even while our nations work to address these collective challenges, our businesses, including many in the virtual rooms we have this morning or afternoon, face continuing uncertainty. The war in Ukraine is one factor driving this uncertainty, inflation another, and indeed businesses are facing additional uncertainty about the UK's relationship with the EU and the future of the Northern Ireland Protocol. I think the survey that British American Business published early this year underscored what we are hearing at the Department of Commerce from the US business community, and that this uncertainty is beginning to negatively weigh on investor confidence. And here I'm talking about global confidence as well. Now, at the International Trade Administration, where I sit, we remain committed to supporting the transatlantic relationship. As many of you know, Secretary Raimondo visited London last Friday. We won't talk about the result of the soccer match, where she met with US and UK business leaders to hear from companies on both sides of the Atlantic. She met separately with UK government officials and announced several deliverables in the digital sector, which will be a key area of focus in the coming months. Just to note a couple of these successes, I think, that underscore the strength and close nature of our relationship, was the joint announcement with UK Digital Secretary Michelle Donnellan of the launching of a new US-UK comprehensive dialogue on data and emerging technology, again, demonstrating our commitment to work with the UK on a new era of strategic cooperation in technology policy. And areas are included for discussion. Areas included for discussion include supply chain diversification in the telecommunications sector, artificial intelligence research, data innovation, and supporting cross-border data flows. I think the message that I underscore here is, as many of you can appreciate, these are the technologies of the 21st century and are going to be drivers of a lot of the economic success and competitiveness that we're going to see from our companies in the future. To that end, the secretaries also announced progress made on the US-UK data adequacy discussions. This is a product of an incredible amount of work between our respective negotiating teams and will help us stabilize transatlantic data flows and expand our cooperation on global data initiatives. This is all positive news for our stakeholders, but especially, and I underscore especially, for our small and medium-sized companies. They rely heavily and disproportionately on stable and transparent trade rules to underpin the transatlantic digital ecosystem. There I'll put a plug. We supporting of US small and medium-sized enterprises is obviously one of the International Trade Administration's and the Commerce Department's top priorities. And we will be participating in the 6th US-UK Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Dialogue in Edinburgh, Scotland at the end of November. And I hope some of you today will be participating in that session. I'll turn very briefly to the International Trade Administration's priorities for Europe, because I understand there's an interest from this group about my touching on some of the topics there. And I will begin with an issue that takes front and center in that discussion, which is the US and EU Trade and Technology Council. You may not know, but the Department of Commerce leads or co-leads on 5 of the 10 TTC working groups. Those are the tech standards, the secure supply chain, the information and communications, telecommunications security and competitiveness working group, export controls cooperation, and promoting SME access to and use of digital technologies. Again, we here at the Commerce Department are very focused on those 5 working groups, and the Secretary has been very active in the work of the TTC, and her goal is to achieve and ensure that we demonstrate and deliver meaningful, impactful results to our stakeholders. That also includes, I might add, engaging a variety of stakeholders, both those traditional and non-traditional, and I think a lot of the effectiveness that the Department of Commerce has witnessed in the 5 working groups we lead or co-lead are as a result of this pretty exhaustive outreach on the US side. Some of the issues we're focused on right now in the run-up to our next ministerial, which we don't have an exact date, but we expect will be sometime in early December. We are focused on semiconductors, obviously, given the work we've done with the CHIPS Act and the Science Act, semiconductors and supply chains related to semiconductors. Stay tuned. We have a few deliverables on that front. Joint work with the European Union on information and communications technologies deployment in third countries. Very exciting work, groundbreaking work going on there. Continuing work on export controls. I think the Russian invasion of Ukraine has highlighted the need to continue to focus on export controls. And our businesses have asked us, and we're responding by doing some joint work and providing guidance on artificial intelligence. So those are some of the highlights that you should expect to hear about come December. Again, we don't have a date, but it will be here in the United States. Before I close, I did want to highlight an initiative that's very important to me, and it's one that bridges the United States and the United Kingdom and Europe, frankly, and that's our close partnership with the American Chambers of Commerce in Europe and British American Business in the UK, and that is the launch of the Empower Her initiative. And this initiative is about advancing women's economic empowerment and gender equality in international trade through urging US and European companies to diversify their workplace and support women-owned businesses, improving tools and services for women, and increasing awareness for female entrepreneurs of trade, investment, and export-related services. So, we at the department call on US, UK, and European companies to remain leaders of diversity, inclusion, and corporate social responsibility in the global economy, and ask that you join us in fostering gender equality and women's empowerment in every country in which we operate. Before I close, I should note, and I thank the British American Business for being such a wonderful partner of ours. I think we continue to rely on that relationship and very much value, Duncan, continuing to work with you as the challenges that I outline, frankly, those solutions to those challenges will include business participation and business leadership. And I think working with groups like yours are critically important to make sure that we do prioritize correctly. And again, I'm speaking for the Department of Commerce. So, in terms of commercial engagement, and I look forward, Duncan, to continuing the discussion with you, with your member companies. And also we value the report you're putting out, but frankly, all the reports that you've put out that help inform US-UK dialogue. So I apologize for the delay. I certainly, again, thank you all for giving me the opportunity to participate today. And with that, Duncan, back to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you very much for giving us some of your time today and for your remarks. And congratulations on your leadership on Empower Her. And we're very, very happy to be part of that in the UK and with our colleagues in the AmChams around Europe. I'm going to move straight away, if I can, to the Right Honourable Jessie Norman MP, who is the newly appointed Minister for the Americas at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in the UK, in the new government. Minister, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much indeed, Duncan. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this great event. I was very struck and interested by what David was just saying as well from a US commerce perspective. Maybe I can give a few insights from the UK side. I should say that I've been in the job a princely total of about 4.5 weeks. And so I bring all of the combined experience of that period of time to the detail of it. But in a wider sense, I have been a student of foreign policy for 30 years. I lived in the States for 6 years. It's a country I know incredibly well and I deeply love. And so the chance to speak to you guys, to foster the cause of British American business could not be closer to my heart. And I thank you for the opportunity very much. And it was interesting that David picked up the football. Now, no one's talking about the football in its recent incarnation, but David will know, and you all will know, that that is a fantastic British success story, but it is one that is being increasingly enabled by American investment and American talent. You don't have to spend much time watching Leeds United to see Jesse Marsh, a great American coach, taking a fabulous, ancient, historic British team forward, most recently with the support of Brendan Aronson, who's a New Jersey boy and a fantastic player. And I've known there'll be a lot more human talent coming over. And of course, that goes alongside substantial flows of American investment, most recently into Bournemouth, not necessarily a club one might have expected to be the recipient of international investment, but absolutely underlining the extent to which these propositions are very, very important media properties and very important sporting entities in their own right. And I would expect them to go hypersonic in some way over the next few years, just as Liverpool, for example, and other clubs that have had American investment have done. So that's a lovely little snapshot, if you like, of the way in which British-American partnership and investment can transform business outcomes. And in a way, that's not surprising because, as everyone knows, the UK and I'm of course talking about soccer rather than football. I mean real football rather than football in the American sense. And of course, in a way, this isn't surprising because we all know that Britain and America have been the closest of allies for nigh on 200 years, and come from the same place in many ways, emotionally, for many years, decades before that. And that doesn't just apply to business, it applies to defense and intelligence and security and a whole bunch of other things. And we come from the same legal place, common law, constitutional tradition, emphasizing human rights, personal freedoms, and all the rest of it. And what a fantastic thing that is, and how proud I am to be able to speak to it, as I know my American counterparts would be, and many have done so in the past. And of course, the US is our single biggest trading partner. And so all of that undergirds the strength of the kinds of relationships in the specifics that you folks will be talking about and that matter a lot to us. And of course, it also underlies that as the world becomes increasingly complex and increasingly interconnected, these economic and political challenges, the importance of having innovative solutions that really boost businesses, that lift up employees and customers and people and economies more generally, and that deliver a fairer and freer world has never been more important. And I think, in that sense, the US and the UK are in different ways linchpins of a vital global economic order. And within that, British American business plays a fantastic role. And as I say, I thank you very much for that. And the capacity to convene and to guide discussions that can in turn channel investment and innovation and thereby boost prosperity, I mean, that's a fantastic thing in its own right. And I've noticed, and my officials have been keen to remind me, as I've looked into this over the recent days, the work that you've done to reopen transatlantic travel and to try to shape the talks on the future of transatlantic trade, and how welcome is that. But of course, as has been said, as David has said, there's even more we can do together, and that I hope we will do together. And let's start with trade, because that's the thing on everyone's mind. You all know that the Prime Minister has said that, noted that we are not expecting to negotiate a free trade deal with the US in the short to medium term. Now, at one level, that is something that I think has not been hidden from folks on either side of the Atlantic for some time, and perhaps it was always an ambitious goal. But of course, it doesn't mean there aren't lots of other things that we can do alongside those continuing discussions. It's our priority as a government to make it easier, quicker, and more cost-effective for businesses to work together across the Atlantic. And that priority hasn't been changed at all. And so, of course, as you may know, we've had these highly productive trade dialogues with the US administration in Baltimore and in Aberdeen. We've agreed to work on a roadmap that covers crucial areas: digital trade and support for SMEs, as David's mentioned, security for critical supply chains, and of course, at the same time, protecting labor and environmental standards. And that's all important. And again, without wanting to echo too hard what David's already said, the emphasis that we've placed alongside Commerce Department on strengthening UK-US trade for small and medium-sized enterprise through SME dialogues has been very important. And the next one of those dialogues is due to take place next month. So all of that is good. But we're also trying to keep up the momentum at the state level. And that's involved detailed work to try to unlock barriers for businesses, build economic ties in different ways, including by securing memoranda of understanding on trade and economic cooperation with individual states. Now, these MOUs are not legally binding, but they serve to codify mutual political will and to embed that. And that in turn embeds certain expectations and stability essential to business. And of course, thereby to try to grow trade and to reduce and simplify any market access barriers, and thereby in turn to build support for the wider US-UK trade agenda. So that is important work in and of its own right. And you may know that my beloved and esteemed colleague, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, as it were, re-emphasized his enthusiasm and commitment for this agenda and for regional engagement in particular when he visited the States in April. And of course, he is my immediate predecessor, but one as Minister of North America, and of course, addressed this esteemed group, and many of you, I'm sure, will recall his words. And it's fantastic to have a Foreign Office hand as a minister now as the Foreign Secretary, because it just means we can hit the ground running. And he's got a particular affinity and love for the Americas, as you might imagine. And so it's a joy for me to work with him on that. And of course, the tech partnership that Deputy Assistant Secretary DeFalco Davis just mentioned is itself part of this, this new annual dialogue that we've put in place. And we want to use that to make further progress towards a data adequacy agreement, again, to boost digital trade and enhance business strength. Look, it would be impossible to discuss this without coming to the other big item that I know will be on your agenda alongside trade, and that is, the situation with Ukraine and Russian aggression. As you know, it's an ever-changing picture at the moment. We all hoped and prayed we would never see a war on the European continent again, and the idea that Russia has attacked a sovereign, free and independent state through an invasion, committing the crime of aggression, and as it appears, other crimes besides, is unconscionable and has enormous implications, which we are working through with our counterparts in the US as regards the security and the safety and the resilience and redundancy associated with trade and indeed more widely with the worlds of business and politics that we all live in. It has never been more important for us to redouble our efforts to support this shared agenda of democracy and personal freedom. And we have sought not only to support Ukraine as strongly as we can militarily and in other ways, but also, of course, to deepen cooperation with our G7 allies through new mechanisms designed to resist economic aggression and coercion and improve collective strength. And that in particular means a new economic security mechanism, which I've been particularly working on and will be in the next few months, which the Prime Minister has referred to. It's called an economic NATO. Now, that may not necessarily be a phrase that's to everyone's taste, but it does capture the essential idea, which is that we should be able to improve our collective ability to assess, to deter, to respond to threats from aggressive powers, from a defensive standpoint, and reaching down into key sectors, as well as other mechanisms that we can use to improve our collective resilience. And that means that we, alongside our friends and allies, must come together to increase that resilience and to reduce our dependence in supply chains on critical minerals or other aspects, other materials coming, or other technologies coming from authoritarian states. And of course, that includes, most notably, and it's been a source of tremendous work and effort and considerable public concern, reduction in our reliance or dependency on Russian energy supplies. And of course, all that in turn feeds into a much wider agenda of creating a certain kind of match fitness against future shocks of this kind. So let me say, those are the areas that I'm focusing on. I've talked a little bit about trade and the wider position there, and our doubling down on trade in relation to the US and transatlantic potential, and potential in particular in the digital space, but also the concerns that we've been addressing in relation to Ukraine, Russia, and the work we're doing to improve economic collective resilience. And we do that with our friends, the Americans, the closest of our allies, and we do it in the hope that through them and with them, we can lift that partnership and ancillary relationships in and around the G7 to the next level. And, it's fantastic to know that in doing that, we're working with the grain of the work that you're doing at British American Business. It's delightful that we know that you guys see the opportunities just as clearly as we do. And I massively look forward to continuing our future work together. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you, Minister, and you seem to be across your brief already. So 4 weeks' work. We look forward to seeing you when you're fully embedded, and we'd like to see you here as well, of course, in the US on one of your trips. I'm just going to shift my agenda a little bit because I know that we have Senator Tom Tillis with us, and I know he's got a hard stop in a few minutes. So, Senator, if you're there, and I know you would like to make some remarks, it's great to have you with us, and I'll pass the floor to you.
Well, thank you, Duncan, and thanks everybody for allowing me to join. I appreciate the opportunity, although I'm not suited up like you all. I felt like if I'm working in my great state of North Carolina, I'm going to wear a North Carolina uniform. And Mr. Minister, I'm not going to take exception to your characterization of U.S. football because I agreed with everything else you said. I want to talk a little bit about, well, first off, North Carolina is set up for business. We look forward to those state relationships with the UK, but what I really look forward to is going back and taking a look at the tremendous strategic opportunity we have for accelerating trade agreements. We were so close with TPP. TTIP had promised, it had work to do. A direct bilateral relationship with the UK would be welcome. I think that trade is an enormously important strategic weapon. Not only does it support us and provide economic benefits, but I think it's a strategic weapon when we look at, particularly down in Indo-PACOM and China, to not really isolate China, but to make it clear that we have alternatives. And the best way to produce those alternatives is through a network of trade relationships, opportunities to make our supply chains more resilient by having more links in the chain, not de-linking from China, but putting us on a better foundation for negotiating with China moving forward. I believe that there are a number of areas of the world where we ought to be investing and helping develop economies that give us more friendly jurisdictions to set up shops. But between COVID and the war in Ukraine, Russia's illegal annexation or invasion of Ukraine, we've got a lot of economic headwinds ahead of us. So how do we deal with that? It's very clear. Hopefully this winter, the energy strain will not be that great. But if this war is to move on to the next winter, and it likely will, what can we do in the meantime to be prepared for a rebalancing of where energy inputs come from and where they go to? And as the minister said, woven into that is not only, say, natural gas and U.S. energy production to be able to provide more supply, but it's also in the area of rare earth minerals. I think that we have to jointly figure out if we have our own, as we do in North Carolina. We're sitting on the single largest deposit of high-grade lithium in North America. We're going through a permitting process. We have to find a way to demonstrate to the world that we can be self-sufficient, we can be a supplier, we can reduce our dependence on countries whose relationships are only one disagreement away from disrupting things that are absolutely essential for our modern economies to perform. I also think that in the time that we're looking ahead, in my mind, I'm not an economist, but I do follow economic trends. In my mind, we're going into a very, very difficult 2023. A recession is more likely than not. The Fed here is likely to raise rates 2 more times to get somewhere to 4 or 4.25 points by the end of the year. It will take our economy about 6 months to absorb that, and when they do, it won't be in a positive way. So what can we do to actually stimulate economic activity in the United States? A part of that is stimulating legal immigration, filling the nearly 11 million jobs that are open, that but for an increase in legal and foreign inputs, people through green cards, through guest workers, through various other programs that are being stressed right now, we're not going to be able to take some of the edge off of what I believe are very negative economic indicators going into next year. I think we also have to take a look at deregulation. Now, I don't mean removing regulations, I mean right-sizing them. In the energy industry, we need more certainty. Without that certainty, I was a partner at Price Waterhouse, advised clients on long-term capital expenditures. In the United States today, if I were working in the energy sector, it would be difficult for me to advise a client to make a multi-billion-dollar, multi-year investment without the certainty that you could get a return on that investment. We have to have a reasonable discussion about the movement of energy through pipelines in the United States. And I might also add, in my last few visits to Europe, most notably Serbia, we've got to figure out how to get a network of energy pipelines through the UK that did not come from Russia, but come from other jurisdictions. I think if we work on trying to tailor regulations to be responsible environmentally, continue to try and maintain taxes at a sustainable level. As someone who voted for the CHIPS Act, I thought it was important for us to invest in the ability for us to have our own indigenous semiconductor manufacturing. By the same token, a part of the reason why we have the CHIPS Act is the numbers don't work, but for government providing some economic stimulus. Maybe we should look at why that is. What could we do to reduce the cost of doing business? I'll speak for the United States. I suspect the same could be said for the UK, so that we become more broad-based, hospitable homes to future manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing. Now, I'll leave you with this. This is not hypothetical. In the 4 years before I joined the Senate, I was elected to Speaker of the House. We were in the fourth quartile for state economies at the time. And through regulatory tailoring, through diverse energy policy, through renewable portfolio standards on energy, through a focus on solar industry, we became one of the top 3 states for solar, and now one of the top 10 states for economic performance. So it's a matter of getting everyone to the table on a bipartisan basis to try and provide, I think, an even better product than the United States already has. And I'm sure I will not speak for the UK, but these are the sorts of things that can grow our economies if we grow our links through trade, through memorandums of understanding through the states. Then I think it's something that can become a model for other freedom-loving democratic nations, Western economies to join together and build up what I think will be an economic force that has implications long beyond the economic well-being of our individual citizens. So thank you all for letting me join today. I moved my hard stop back, so I'm going to go into listen mode, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. And I think I see Peter Pappas in the room. Oh, let me just say one other thing that I do think that we can work on. I am the ranking member of the Intellectual Property Subcommittee in the Judiciary Committee. We have got to work on protecting our intellectual property. We have to take a look at threats to our intellectual property theft, not the least of which is the rampant theft that we see from China. And we have to protect it, protect our patent system, protect the intellectual property of patent holders, or we're at risk of losing both of our countries' distinct advantage, measurable advantage that we have in innovation. So once again, thank you all. I'm going to go on mute, but I'm going to listen in on the rest of the program.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. And I am going to try now to whistle through in like 3 to 4 minutes the policy agenda items that BAB is focused on before we've got a few speakers more lined up that we'll try to get to before the top of the hour. So if my team can put up the 3 slides. First of all, I just want to go back one, please. I think we're going to talk about what we had in our policy agenda a year ago. We called for a call for the start of formal talks on transatlantic data flows. We talked about what should replace the formal discussion of trade negotiation. We called for the SME dialogue to be restarted. We called for transatlantic air corridor to be reopened. We remember that when none of us could get anywhere. We talked about the need to reduce the tension between the UK and the EU relating to the TCA and other elements of that unfinished Brexit negotiation. And we talked about the importance of both countries investing in skills and the availability of people that our businesses need. And I think we were prescient about some of those issues. There has been some positive things over the last year that I would highlight. So on November the 8th, the US finally opened up air travel with almost all restrictions removed. We worked incredibly hard on that with our airline partners and hospitality industry. It's been referenced just now. In December last year, the Commerce Secretary and the then DCMS Secretary Nadine Dorries signed an agreement on their commitment to deepening the UK-US data partnership and working on the post-privacy shield solution. We heard more about that last week, of course. The trade dialogue started in the spring in Baltimore and Aberdeen, and whilst they fell a long way short of what we think is needed in terms of full free trade agreement, they were positive. It was good to have the conversations. And the UK-US SME dialogue started again in Boston, which we helped to facilitate. There's also been some work, although by no means enough, in both countries, with government helping industry to train the specific skills that are needed for their industry. So let me jump very quickly to what we're going to be talking about in this year's policy agenda. First and foremost, we still believe that trade agreement would be beneficial to both the US and the UK economies. And whilst we accept that in the short term that's not going to happen, we think there are plenty of things that can be done. And we've specified 6 things in our policy document that are tangible issues that both governments can work on to facilitate more trade and investment without the need for a full FTA. We'll talk specifically about tax in the policy agenda and the need for both countries to remain tax competitive, particularly thinking about corporate income tax. We're very pleased to see the UK did not raise corporate income tax as they had signaled that they were going to do, and we hope that the US rates of corporate income tax remain as they are now as well. As the Senator teed this up nicely, IP has come right to the top of the agenda for many of our members. We had a meeting recently with the IP attaché for Europe and US Commerce Department, and there were industries from technology, media, life sciences, entertainment, all in the room, all making the same points, that the US and the UK have historically been the most reliable defenders of intellectual property rights. And there is some question of whether that remains, the commitment remains as solid as it has historically been. We're going to be talking about data over the next year, and it's very positive signs after the meetings last week. We'll be hoping that the next stage of that process moves along as quickly as possible. Sustainability is crucial after COP26. I think business has shown that it is on the front foot regarding sustainability, and we will be talking about the need for government to ensure that the regulatory environment is appropriate to allow businesses to continue to do business, and there's a degree of certainty for particularly those businesses which are in more carbon intensive sectors. Talent mobility and skills continues to be a priority for all of our members, both the physical ability to move talent around the world, particularly in and out of the US, but also making sure that there are the people are available to hire with the required skills that businesses need. We have, as I said at the start, there are a couple of sectors where we're going to be focusing on specific industries, particularly in financial services, with our partners at City UK and other financial services trade associations. Ideally, we want to see the regulatory environment in the US and the UK to be as equivalent as possible to allow US and UK financial services companies to do business seamlessly from both countries. And we've specifically been asked to focus on the life science industry as well. The UK has been a destination of huge amounts of capital in the life science sector, and it is a jewel in the UK crown of inward investment, and that sector needs care from the UK government to ensure that those businesses remain as committed to the UK as they have historically been. So that is an incredibly quick rattle through what you will see in our policy agenda. But I realised that we were a little bit up against time, and I do want to bring in some of the other speakers who've joined us today. I think I'm going to start, if I may, and apologies to those who thought they were going to come on first, because I think he may have a hard stop. So former member of Congress, Charlie Dent, is with us. If you are there, Congressman, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Well, thank you. I am here, and I appreciate this this convening by the British American Business Council. I just want to make a few quick points. I certainly enjoyed hearing from all the speakers. Secretary DeFalco talked quite a bit about digital trade. Jesse Norman brought up the issue of an economic NATO, something I've also talked about at some length. Of course, I largely agree with what I heard from Senator Tillis as well about a need to move forward on a trade agenda. Given the fact that I think that the transatlantic relationship is now at a point where we've recognized that Russia has brought us closer together. China's more assertive or aggressive moves in the Indo-Pacific have also caused great concern. It seems that this is the time to strike. If we're ever going to do agreements on trade, the time is now. A U.S.-UK trade agreement, I understand there doesn't seem to be a lot of enthusiasm at the moment, but if not now, when? This seems to me to be the time to strike. I would also argue same thing with the U.S.-EU trade agreement. I think on our side of the Atlantic, we've made some strategic blunders on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, at least as related to China. We need to move forward. Now, the politics, and I won't speak for Senator Tillis if he's still listening, but the politics of these trade agreements, particularly with Europe and of course the UK, I don't think is as difficult as it would be with our Asian friends and partners. And again, given the fact that Putin has exposed our vulnerabilities, at least particularly on the energy side, we should move forward. I noticed too on many of the themes that you brought up that were brought up in the most recent video. We talked about data flows, financial services. All this should be brought together on one broad trade agreement, in my view, rather than. I know they're dealing with these things as one-off issue, which is interesting, but I again, it speaks to the fact that there is a lot of interaction, and this needs to be done in a much more coordinated manner than has been the case. So my bottom line is, there's a lot of opportunity right now to improve what is a great relationship with the UK, I think this whole idea of an economic NATO is important because that economic relationship will certainly complement our security relationships, which have only grown stronger in recent months thanks to Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. So that I thought I'd stop there and yield to the other speakers.
We are, at BAB, we're indebted to the work of our Policy Steering Committee, and I'm pleased to say that Gillian Murch, from the Senior Director of Government Affairs at Qualcomm, who is a co-chair of our Policy Steering Committee, is with us. And Gillian, did you want to add a few comments?
Yes, thank you, Duncan. And I think, first of all, as policy co-chair, it would be remiss of me not to thank the staff, particularly Dagny and Emmanuel, for putting together such an excellent document. I mean, BAB is unique because we have a broad set of companies, and creating something like this is really, really difficult. And I think not only is it a clear and easy to read document, but it has real, tangible ideas and actionable things for policymakers. So I just want to, in case there isn't another moment to do that, sort of thank the staff for all the efforts they put in. I think there's two areas in the document that Qualcomm was particularly passionate about. The first is the sort of skills agenda. We are a research and development company at the end of the day, most famously being the largest fabless semiconductor company in the world. And there's a lot of engineering talent and research that goes into that effort. And the UK and the US are two of the world's sort of premier research jurisdictions. And for us, having the talent and the skills needed to support those jobs, just my company alone has 100 open posts in the UK that we would love to see filled. So anything we can do to encourage people into those STEM fields, into those sort of really high tech areas, I think would be a benefit to both of our economies. And then the other area I really wanted to pick up on, and I'm so thrilled that Senator Tillis brought this up, is the importance of IP and the fact that both the UK and the US are two of the best IP jurisdictions in the world. And one of the things we call for in this report is a UK-US IP dialogue. I think we very much support that. I think the UK and the US taking a lead and finding ways to sort of reinforce solid IP protection is really important in things like trade agreements and sort of global dialogues. And so we really hope to see that sort of idea taken forward in the new year. I know we're pressed for time, Duncan, so I'm going to yield back the remainder of my time and thank everyone that joined us today because we're really proud of this document and happy that it's now out there in the world.
Thank you, Gillian, and thank you for all that you do for us at British American Business. We're incredibly grateful. BAB is, as well as being the affiliate of the US Chamber of Commerce in the UK, we are the AmCham in the UK. We're also the affiliate of the British Chambers of Commerce here in the United States. And I'm pleased that Siobhan Haviland, who's the CEO of the British Chambers, is with us. And Siobhan, I wonder if you had any comments from your perspective running the British Chambers. Siobhan may not be there, in which case I'll ask Garrett Workman to talk on behalf of the US Chamber and any comments you might have. Garrett.
Yeah, thanks so much, Duncan. Thanks everyone from BAB for the opportunity, for the study. I know Emmanuel and Dagny and others have worked really hard on this for a while. Part of my job at the US Chamber is to run something called the US-UK Business Council, which is one of, I think, 20 or so business councils that the Chamber has focusing on advancing bilateral partnerships with important countries. Obviously for us, it was an outgrowth of the referendum in 2016 and how the US was gonna engage with the UK post-Brexit, as well as how the UK and the EU were gonna hopefully solve all of their remaining issues. So it probably won't surprise you that our policy agenda looks quite similar to yours. I think we focus on a lot of the same issues, trade obviously being preeminent. The importance of IP across all sectors is really important. And thanks for the shout out of the Chamber's IP Index in your study, where we do think the US and the UK get this the most right. It's another avenue, frankly, where a trade agreement would be a great opportunity for us to set and maintain high standards and provide an opportunity for other countries to follow our lead. We don't need a trade agreement between us to do that, but we should actually be encouraging, for example, as the UK is doing its own trade agreements with other countries, for them to be maintaining high IP standards in those agreements. And we've heard some concern from members that that may or may not necessarily be the case. Obviously, data, some really good news last week. The executive order from the White House wasn't focused on just the EU, which is good. The changes that are being made to the intelligence services are global in nature and will, obviously give a lot of reassurances to other countries who also need to give us data adequacy, notably including the UK. I would say too, obviously want to agree with almost everything, which I know is boring, but I think one of the things that we haven't talked a lot about is how the US and UK need to coordinate better together on things like China. I think it's probably an opportunity where the new prime minister is probably much more aligned with this town than maybe her predecessor. That's a blessing and a curse from a business perspective, let's be clear. But I think obviously when you have alignment between close partners and close trading allies, that is an effective tool of deterrence, as well as encouraging hopefully more reassurance between us. I mean, we talk a lot about trading less with others, but we need to talk more about trading more with like-minded friends, and not just talk about friendshoring, but actually start implementing. So, I mean, I think there's a lot that we want to do with you, and I appreciate the close partnership that we've long enjoyed with, obviously, with BAB and the entire AmCham network. And so, thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Garrett. And I think you're 100% right about Liz Truss and both China and Ukraine. I think she will be a more hawkish and a very reliable partner to this administration on China. Her predecessor was certainly more equivocal, trying to ride two horses, I think, as he did on a lot of issues in Venice. So, and finally, I think if we have time, William Blomfield, who's the Public Affairs Director for Mars in the UK, Andy Farrow, based here in the US, is the other co-chair of our Policy Steering Committee. But William, are you there?
I'm here. I'll be very quick because I know it's up on the hour. So, I mean, I was just going to say a couple of things. Firstly, Andy apologises for not being able to here today, but he was he and we at Mars are very positive about the agendas, targeted, relevant, and I think we also deliverable, and I think that's important. I particularly wanted to welcome the inclusion of sustainability as a topic. It's something that we've already seen huge collaboration in the US and the UK over the years, not least in Glasgow this year, but also we expect further collaboration in Egypt. And I think it's a recognition of the opportunity for business and government to work together to deliver our net zero targets. So I'll leave it at that because I know we're at times of the essence, but hugely welcome that, and thanks for all your hard work at BAB.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And just to bring things to a close for this part of the day, I'm going to ask James Mason from APCO Worldwide, I think who's also with you in London, just for a final comment.
Yeah, I was going to strike a optimistic note, obviously, and build on the minister's comments and optimism, and just remind everyone we have a Prime Minister who talked about growth in her recent party conference speech in Birmingham, and has set a 2.5% growth target. We also have Kemi Badenoch, a very ambitious and new Trade Secretary who will deliver. She spoke recently in New York and said right now US and UK trade is booming. So we have a good British political dynamic now to push forward trade, and obviously I'm delighted to in part sponsor this event and hear such optimism about where we're going over the next year. So thank you very much, and thank you from APCO.
Well, thank you from BAB for hosting us today. We really appreciate it. And so I think with that, we're going to bring to a close this US-UK part of our day. I think because it's that time of day in the UK, they get a drink. We've got some lunch. So thank you, and we'll grab some lunch and then reconvene. Thank you.
Hey folks, Derek Kilmer here, proud representative for Washington State's 6th Congressional District, which covers most of Tacoma and the Olympic Peninsula. I have a personal, long-standing tie to the UK as I studied at Oxford as a Marshall Scholar. My thesis at Oxford was actually a comparison between the experiences of mining communities in South Wales and timber towns in Washington State, where I came from, and looking at how to create economic development opportunities to help communities that are facing persistent economic distress. In fact, after the Marshall Scholarship, I went to work in economic development professionally, taking the things I learned in the UK with me. And as someone who worked in economic development, let me just say thank you. Thanks all of you for being there today, for creating jobs in the US and the UK, for your important work to strengthen the special relationship between our two countries. I'm really heartened to see that your proposed policy agenda for the upcoming year includes bold advocacy goals like advancing a pro-trade agenda and improving education and skills for all of our workers. I was also glad to see that sustainability and reduced carbon emissions are among your key priorities. My district is already being impacted by climate change. I represent 12 Native American tribes, 4 are coastal tribes that, as we sit here, are in the process of trying to be relocated to higher ground because they're seeing rising sea levels threaten the existence of their communities. So your work advocating for action on climate, on top of your efforts facilitating business relationships between our two countries, is really vital. So thank you for that too. Listen, representing Washington State, I know the importance of international trade and the benefits of access to international markets for businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. With that in mind, I'm a proud member of the Pro-Trade New Democrat Coalition. As some of you may know, the New Democrats is a group of Democratic members of Congress who broadly agree that our country does better when we work to responsibly break down trade barriers. New Dems know that our economy thrives when we sell our products, our goods and services overseas. In the case of my home state, this means accessing markets for Washington State apples and wood products and airplanes and software and delicious almond roca made in Washington's 6th Congressional District and all sorts of other products. According to the Export-Import Bank, Washington State is the most trade-dependent state in the country, with roughly 40% of our jobs tied in some way to foreign commerce. So, trading relationships are obviously vital to my state, but no trade partnership is more important than with the United Kingdom. In fact, nearly 20,000 Washingtonians' jobs are directly tied to UK companies, with the UK being Washington's single largest source of foreign investment. So, understandably, fostering a strong relationship with the UK is of great importance to me. I'm proud to be co-chair of the bipartisan House UK caucus, which includes members from across the country and interested in fostering our important friendship. In this role, I regularly get to engage other members about our US-UK partnership. I also meet with British members of Parliament, with the ambassador and the folks who work at the British Embassy, as well as other British stakeholders and leaders like you, in the hopes that Congress can continue to be a partner to our friends across the Atlantic. This effort would not be possible without British American businesses and similar groups who constantly work to make it easier for folks to do business in both of our countries. So I just want to close by saying thank you. Thank you for making my job easier as I work to highlight your efforts and the importance of strengthening business, not to mention cultural ties between the US and the UK. And next time, I hope to be able to speak to you in person. All right, take care, everybody. Thanks again.